Hello, hello.
Not be to my advantage,
Thank you,
but
thank you.
me and Steve both thought it was probably better.
Great, we've got some numbers coming in now, guys. Just a reminder to make sure that you're on mute. Beautiful. All right. We'll just wait a few more moments for more to join, but our numbers are going strong. Just a reminder again that we'll audience members will ask you to be on mute for the call. Right. Okay. Well, I think we'll kick off. We've got some good numbers. Welcome everybody to the Thriving from the Start Network's first event for 2024. We're very excited to have you all here today and look forward to exploring the topic of career adaptability. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the various lands from upon which we all meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Zachary Heim. I'm a solicitor at King & Wood Mallisons in our Perth office, as well as a proud member of the CMHAA's Early in Careers Committee. Just to explain some of those terms for those unaware, the Corporate Mental Health Alliance of Australia, or CMHAA, is a business-led and expert-guided member organisation dedicated to providing mentally healthy workplaces for all people. The Early in Careers Committee, or EIC, is a subsection of the CMHAA. The EIC committee was founded to specifically support those starting off in their career, given the particular challenges that group faces to ensure the maintenance of good mental health and wellbeing. The Thriving from the Start Network is an initiative from the EIC committee, which seeks to bring young professionals together to help achieve that goal. All following. We're really excited to have you all here today to kick off our 2024 events with a topic that most of us will face as we continue in our careers and be forced to respond to change, and that is career adaptability. So what's that? Career adaptability refers to the ability of individuals to effectively navigate and thrive in the dynamic and ever-changing landscape of the modern workplace. They're not just buzzwords, it's real. It encompasses a set of skills, attitudes, and behaviours that empower individuals to proactively respond to career-related challenges and opportunities. So why talk about this with those early in their career? It is the case that young professionals are often highly exposed to uncertainties, transitions, and evolving demands in the workforce. Young professionals have often taken graduate or starting roles outside of the traditional scope of their training or degree, or may have made a career change after finding out upon gaining some exposure that one path wasn't exactly what they expected. Sometimes we also find the goalposts shift or our assumptions are disrupted. For example, now many of us are trying to balance our professional development with working from home, or for example, the very well documented impact that AI tools are having on our daily tasks and expectations when it comes to our roles. To give a personal example, career adaptability became a real challenge when completing the graduate program at King & Wood Mallisons. I rotated through 3 teams in 18 months, starting completely new in each team, having to learn how those teams work and the content they work with, all with an eye to deciding where I wanted to settle and continue my career. So it was kind of like shifting grounds, constantly trying to figure out what these teams do as well as where do I want to be. Adaptability enables young professionals to not only survive, but also thrive in a changing environment, enhancing career satisfaction and personal wellbeing. So our goal today is to help you understand what career adaptability really is, what to expect from change within or between workplaces and careers, and to give you practical tips and tricks that you can implement to help yourselves as well as your peers. We're delighted to be joined today by 2 guest speakers who I'll introduce to you now. Their names will be on the screen, but our first guest speaker is Dr. Eleanor Death-Miller. Eleanor is a consultant psychologist with a doctoral degree in clinical neuropsychology. She's a coach and consultant with Transitioning Well, maintains a clinical role in a large Melbourne public hospital, and lectures in the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences at the University of Melbourne. Eleanor translates evidence-based mental health and wellbeing information to support individuals and teams across all sectors of our community who are experiencing challenge while negotiating change and transition. Thank you for joining us, Eleanor.
Thanks, Zach. Hi, everyone.
Also joining us today is Kelly Lemke. Kelly is currently Senior Manager for Claims Innovation in the Personal Injury Division at Allianz Australia, although she wonders sometimes how she got there. And when you hear her career story, you might be wondering the same. Kelly is deeply committed to social impact and driving positive change through innovation initiatives and strategic partnerships. Her expertise lies in developing and implementing innovation programs that address societal challenges such as mental health or customer vulnerability. She's also a mum to 3 daughters. Thank you, Kelly, also for joining us today.
Thanks, Zach. Hi, everyone.
So before we get started, I'd like to also point out to our audience that we do have a chat function available on this call. Please feel free to contribute to the discussion and post any questions you have throughout the session. We will put some of these questions to our panelists at the end of our formal discussion. We just ask that you do so responsibly and appropriately. Okay, so let's get into the meat of it. Kelly, we might start with you to set the scene. Can you please talk to us about your career path and the unpredictability you've faced?
Sure. So as Zach suggested, my career journey has not been a straight line, and that started as originally wanting to be a journalist and going off and completing a Bachelor of Communications. I did a couple of sort of marketing and comms gigs when I first came out of university. None of them really sort of stuck or I fell in love with. So I came from a bit of a long line of teachers, and I ended up going back and doing my graduate diploma of education. I then ended up being a high school English and history teacher for a couple of years. And I fell out of that due to travelling over to London and not having my police record check in place. So I was unable to continue teaching over there. So I ended up back in comms. I came back to Sydney and I've stayed in corporate communications and corporate since then. I was in marketing comms for probably over 10 years before I took a secondment into a strategy and innovation role. I managed to secure that secondment because I was working with that particular department as the comms manager. And then I've sort of never looked back, actually. I stayed after that maternity leave secondment and I was there for 4 years. Within that period of time, I also jumped across and did another secondment in sustainability and ESG, and then back into the world of personal injury, where I've now, in the role I am now, I have a national role. So yeah, it's been a little bit back and forth, and I would say like one of the things that was unpredictable was obviously falling out of teaching. I didn't expect that. And then when I was coming back after having my 3rd child, I actually called my employer to try and extend my parental leave by a month. And they were like, oh, actually, we need to talk to you. And it turns out that they were making my role redundant. So there's definitely been a couple of hurdles that I've had to get past on the way to where I am right now. But I would say that also the changes and the misdirections that I've had have been life choices. So we'll probably dive a little bit more into that as we go on, but that's sort of how I've come from where I was to where I am now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Through those changes, Kelly, if you can take yourself back to those big moments where you chose to shut one door or open another, or if the door was shut for you, can you recall how you felt and perhaps what you found most challenging?
Yeah, well, I would say the most challenging of those moments was definitely being made redundant. It was honestly terrifying at the time. I had 3 kids and then I was without a job. I had been at that employer for 7 years. So it had been a long time since I'd even been through job interviews. one of the benefits that came out of the redundancy was that they gave me a career coach. That was part of the redundancy package, which I absolutely sorely needed at the time because I was not equipped or prepared for going into new job interviews, to be honest with you. I am incredibly lucky that the first job interview I went for was at Allianz. And so that was about 8 years ago. And I don't know how, but I nabbed that role. But yeah, I would say that like there's been sort of lots of different feelings moving from role to role and coming up against different hurdles. Something that I continue to sort of struggle with is imposter syndrome. I've come from a place where I was a subject matter expert in marketing and communications into a business where that's no longer my role. I do have parts of that in my role, but I'm in a business where I'm surrounded by people with like a ton of technical expertise who have been, there's also a lot of tenure. So people have been there for 10, 15, 20 years. And I'm sure there was a little skepticism when I first came in of like, who are you and what value are you going to bring? But I think that what I've just had to continue to tell myself is that I'm offering something different, and that I've got a unique perspective and voice that is outside of the group of people that exist in that area of the business. Yeah.
And that's fantastic. It certainly sounds like quite a bit to reckon with, and quite a journey you've described. I particularly associate with that kind of institutional knowledge, the people that have been around for a very long time. At a law firm, sometimes the partners they have more years of experience than this building's been standing, and it's an old building, so it's very easy to empathise with that one. Eleanor, I'd like to bring you in now. We've just heard the varied career path that Kelly has undertaken. Her path has varied due to a combination of both choice and circumstance. And it sounds like there have been some ups and downs along the way, but each time she seems to have adapted and thrived in the next environment she's faced. To me, the novice, that's career adaptability. But as an expert in this field, is this what we're talking about when we say career adaptability? And can you please maybe explain that concept to us a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Zach, and thanks, Kelly. Psychologists love a slides and a bit of structure, so don't mind me. I'm just going to pop some bits up as I talk. But yeah, Kelly's absolutely describing, and her individual resources for how she responded to both anticipated events but also unanticipated events and transitions, and the influence that had on her occupational roles. So as she's done that, she's constructed a career path. We've joked that our career paths in general look like the bottom shape there. It is unpredictable, but a lot of what we'll talk about today is to look at how we can look at some of those anticipated changes as well, because careers are rarely linear. And so what Kelly's done, if we look at the origins of the word, even to adapt, it's to fit or it's to join. And as she talks about negotiating work and life and how they influence one another over time, it's really where you join a number of stories and experiences over time. And the backstory of career adaptability itself, it evolved across the 1950s into the 80s. And it's what we call career construction theory. Now, that construction's important because we're active participants in what careers look like, even if there's a lot going on around us. So you'll find a lot about this topic in the literature, thousands of articles. But broadly, if we were to sum it up, it's our willingness and our capability, and they're quite different. So it's important to be focusing on both. But how do we adjust? How do we learn? And how are we growing across these evolving work environments? But it's not just that. Our roles change, and there'll be challenges along the way. There's a quote that a career can be solving a series of problems, and that certainly can be the case. So one of the things I will say is that these novel and complex problems, we do face new issues as we go in career. And what Kelly was also showing us is that experience and upskilling are the only ways through. There's really no other way we can do this over time. So often what people ask, the natural next question is, in a group particularly of early career professionals, why is it so important to strengthen career adaptability? And Zach has alluded to this at the start of today's session, which is we're in a period of rapid and vast technological and economic change. And so we know that if anyone's heard the acronym VUCA, V, higher volatility, U for uncertainty, C for complexity, and A for ambiguity. This environment means that we've, as a result of our digitisation, global integration, all of the things that everybody here understands implicitly. We've got the influence of AI, we've got generational differences. So people in early career right now, have been very adaptable in other areas of life. So that's really important. It's kind of being used to a fast-paced or a digitised environment. But we know that there's going to be impacts over time that are different for this group, and that early in career right now will have a career like nobody ever before, no generation ever before. So it's much likely to be more complicated with a lot of need for learning and relearning, I suppose. And so if we look broadly at some benefits of adaptability, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit later of how we do that. But these are just some key points from the literature as you're looking that help you get a bit of a sense of why it's important. And I suppose for early career employees, managing major workplace and life transitions is important because they often all happen together, right? Particularly in the early years. So the more adaptable you are, we certainly see those bit easier to manage them, but also it helps prepare us for leader roles as well. I think one of the things too that we have discussed is a link between thriving and adaptability. And that was certainly something when we were talking about today. Well, what does that look like for early in career? Does being more adaptable help protect against mental ill health, for example? And what we know is that people who rate themselves a little higher on career adaptability tend to find work more satisfying, but they also tend to create careers that are more sustainable. And what I mean in this particular sense is those careers where we're productive and healthy, and the career is the right fit for us, whichever life stage we're in. So that in itself is a key aspect of maintaining good mental health. And there is a relationship between resilience and adaptability. And this makes sense. It's being more adaptable means that we can adjust to change and transition, and we can manage setbacks, allowing and knowing that they'll happen. But we also know specifically for our early in career professionals that with the adaptability comes feeling more engaged at work, and generally a sense that people will rate that they're thriving more generally. So that's a bit of a summary for us. It gives us a bit of background.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Eleanor. That makes sense to me. I think I can reflect on a few key moments in my extensive 2-year career where that's been the case, or I've observed it in others. I think that, just to throw in my 10 cents for whatever that's worth, I think it makes sense in the sense that a lot of people early in their careers are looking for that next step, and there's a constant focus on development. And I can understand where being able to adapt would seem to help really unlock that and prevent a feeling of stagnation or of lack of progression. So that's quite handy to see. Well, not just handy, but comforting to see that the literature is supporting that. Having understood the importance of career adaptability, then I guess we move into the question of how can we develop or strengthen it. Eleanor, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yep, it's the it's, I guess, the real focus of today, isn't it, is to have a look at what is the literature and the evidence telling us. And we're going to have a look, I suppose, through the lens of the career adaptability model that's quite prominent at the moment, and what we'll link you with is a survey or a questionnaire where you can essentially rate how you're tracking at the moment according to these areas in the literature. And the 4 domains that came out of this particular research, I'm just going to talk quickly about each of them, and then that can help us frame our discussion moving forward. But I suppose the first place that we always start is with reflecting and thinking and focusing on the future of our work. So this is an American model. Concern doesn't mean worry. The goal of the phrase or the word concern is actually a focus or a point of attention. So that's what that means in its essence. And this is just about our future focus. So what does it mean for anticipating what might happen in terms of our careers? What might come next? What are some of the potential transitions in our short, our medium, and our longer term future? And anticipating them doesn't necessarily mean that they will be any less easy when they occur, but it can help that we've had a little bit of time preparing for them psychologically and actually doing a little bit of planning if appropriate, given some of the challenges that we might face across time. And the next dimension, curiosity, this is looking around. It's self-explanatory in the title. We do know that for some people, this is more natural or more, it's easier than others. But it's being curious about the work world, but it's also being curious about ourselves. So are we reflecting on where we're at? When we're faced with uncertainty and confusion, we want to be able to be seeking out information, giving yourself information and helping you. I guess it helps us come up with alternatives and we can make a better decision. Sometimes it's how am I watching and learning from people around me, which we'll come back to hopefully a little bit later. Control is another reflection point, really. One of the phrases in this area is choosing, not chancing. And I really like that because none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow, really. I mean, we have a good idea, but we don't have a lot of control over future events. So we just need to be keeping an eye on what is in our control in terms of our choices, and also keeping an eye on how that remains in line with us, our interests, our motivations, and things like that. And then the last point is confidence. And we've already spoken to this a couple of times, even in our brief time this morning, but it's having some self-belief that you can work on finding solutions and managing difficult situations, but it's not about having all the answers. It's not knowing everything fast, and it's not about never making mistakes. We need to be very clear that it's okay not to know. It's okay to miss the mark. All of us here would put up our hands and say that's certainly happened to us over time. But it's really am I working to my capacities at the moment? What are my growth opportunities? And as we progress, our confidence builds as well.
Fantastic. I think that frames it really well, Eleanor. And I think that gives us plenty of runway into the rest of the session too. Kelly, passing the baton over to you, having listened to Eleanor explain career adaptability from a theoretical point of view, can you see how maybe you practice elements of these domains or have as part of your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Full transparency for everyone on the call. I was not across this theory before I met Eleanor and decided to do this talk. So it did require a little reflecting on my own behalf. I'll just go through each domain and give you a little bit of insight into how I do or do not practice those things. So the first being the concern and planning. To be fair, I would say that by nature, I'm not a planner, and that probably does help with being adaptable. I did use a phrase with Jana that I'm a bit more fly by the seat of my pants, which is, yeah, I think does help with being flexible and changing direction. Although to be fair, like that has changed a little over time as it's sort of needed to. And I'll talk to a little bit about how later. Curiosity, I think that, again, this comes down to sort of my innate nature of being curious. wanting to learn and grow, and those things being at the core of the personal choices that I make regarding my career. So I'm not one to stay in something for a very long time without looking for other opportunities or new projects, or even the role I'm in now is constantly changing and adapting, and there's a huge amount of variety, and that suits me personally. Not everyone would be suited to that particular style of role, but it definitely suits my nature. I would potentially be bored otherwise. From a control perspective, I think that, that's obviously something that we all struggle to let go of. We want to have control of our lives. I definitely haven't always had control, and there's been a level of acceptance that comes with life experience. So the redundancy, for example, but even things that have happened in my own personal life. I was 8 months pregnant when I lost my mother. So things that definitely you're not prepared for, you can't plan for, and you can't control. But there is a certain level of acceptance required that this is part of your human experience. And with that loss of control comes growth, I suppose. And then I guess lastly, from a confidence perspective, I touched on the fact that I still have days where I have imposter syndrome or feel like I'm not quite equipped to complete or run a particular project. I think one of the things that someone told me once, which has really stuck with me actually, and this is more about taking opportunities, but don't wait for that confidence to kick in, because you could potentially be waiting for a lifetime. I'd suggest just go for it. And I think that's sort of, I've taken that sort of attitude with some of the roles that I've gone for, where perhaps I may not have been 100% qualified, but I backed the other set of skills that I had, or the 70, 80% there that I was, and used those attributes and skills to sell myself into a role.
Yeah, great. That's a great shout out, and probably speaks as well to the fact that every mind works differently too. And I think some of those will come more naturally to some than others. Eleanor, it would seem we can lean into our strengths to develop career adaptability, and that we don't have to be practicing maybe all elements at the same time, or as proficiently as not one as proficiently as every other one. Is there anything you would add to that?
No, look, I think the point about strengths is really important, and that's keeping an eye on that for ourselves. There are a number of ways that we can be looking at what they are, building them. There are also sometimes strengths that we underuse. So, technically, however we rate them, they might be there, but they might need some attention. So I find that is really useful too. And it's along with, what's really important to me, what's motivating me, along with your point about not needing to work on them all at once. Absolutely. And remember that I think actually you both, Kelly and Zach, in your own way have already said there are particular parts of, if we look at this model, that you might more intuitively or you might be better at without as much focus. And so remembering that this is about you, but it's also about your job. And it's always about the interaction. So sometimes you'll need to be focusing on what you can control in order to move forward. Sometimes it will be a purely confidence focus. For example, it might be a particular aspect of the role that changes, and you realise that that's where you need to do some work. So no, it doesn't have to be all of it all the time. None of us need that kind of pressure, I guess, do we? But it's a great point. It's in bits as you need them.
Yeah, great. I suppose taking those, those slightly broader topics and drilling down on each of them, I thought perhaps we'd look at strategies that our audience members could undertake for each of those domains. So perhaps starting with planning, and Eleanor, I'll throw to you first. From your perspective and coaching individuals in this space, what do you see that helps with that planning domain?
Yeah, so this is another one, and I like Kelly's point. We all have various degrees of what we like to plan for and how we do it, and what we focus on. But I suppose it is coming back to the short, the medium, and the longer term. So not everybody sits down and writes all that out. Some people do, and that's great. If that's you, continue. If otherwise, it might be just having a sense of what's coming up in each of those areas. And it might be thinking about the kinds of events that we've talked about that might happen. And that might sound, sometimes it can sound like a bit of a waste of time, but actually if we've done some mental preparation, and it might be welcome events. So it might be leadership positions or moving interstate or overseas, or it might be changes in your family and personal life that are positive. It might also be the things that are harder that you don't necessarily see coming, but you might expect at some point. So even if we've thought a couple of steps of what might I do if that happened, we tend to be psychologically better equipped when they do. The other thing I was going to say too, that this is also about being mindful about career development. That is part of looking ahead. So am I having those sorts of conversations regularly with my leader? And also maybe mentors and buddies, not forgetting too that they can be the people who have done more or different looking ahead than you, and you can kind of be part of that discussion with them.
Yeah, excellent. And then what about from your experience and varied career, Kelly? I know you've mentioned before that you're naturally a non-planner. I'm sure there are quite a few people listening who would associate. What strategies do you use to assist yourself in this space?
I have to say I was listening very carefully when Eleanor was speaking then, because I'm trying to get some tips on planning. I would say to what Eleanor was talking about, leaning on mentors and stuff, I do have to lean on the people who are more inclined to plan, and I thrive reporting to someone who is really structured. So I think that those sorts of people keep me grounded and accountable, because I'm very much blue sky. I'm like creative and innovative, and I've got like all these ideas, and sometimes I need people to rein me in. So I think that having people in my network who I can call on and ask questions of and get advice around, where should my priorities be, or like what should things look like in 6 months' time, and just constantly sort of using those people to keep me accountable. I would say that I also over time have come to learn to leverage the structures and tools that exist within the organisation. So Allianz has a very structured way of doing performance planning and development plans, and they're compulsory, which helps, but it's also a really good like intentional checkpoint for me. So every year we have to check in and go, okay, what do we want? What are our own personal goals and aspirations for the year outside of what exists within the scope of our role? And then the last thing on planning, just quickly, is that, and Eleanor touched on it before as well about what's important to you. I think that you don't always need to know exactly where you're going. I think it's actually more important to know what you value and what's important to you, what you're prepared to sacrifice or not to sacrifice. And I would just suggest like taking time to reflect on what you want from your career, how you want to work, what's important to you. I think those things outside of planning are what will drive you forward. Like your core purpose and values are what keeps moving you forward.
Yep. No, well put. Turning to control, I know I found it difficult with the graduate rotation program, not being able to control necessarily which teams I even saw in that program. especially I moved to Perth for the role, so it felt like there was a lot on the line. So Kelly, we might continue through with you here. How do you strengthen this area in relation to control?
Look, as I said before, it's a tough one to let go of because we all want to have control over our lives, especially in situations that are uncertain or unfamiliar. I think even more so during those times, we try and take control. Again, I think there's a certain level of degree of acceptance that is required, a degree of learning to be flexible or agile. I mean, like, if you can't secure your dream role right now, like, what skills and experiences can you acquire that will help you to get there? So I think it's not always having only option A. I think having option B and C, which is how can I develop the skills and experience and knowledge necessary to get there. I think that around this acceptance piece as well, that, like, let's just acknowledge that, like, we're not always going to have control, and that to be challenged is to be human. And let's consider those challenges as opportunities for growth and development. I mean, it sounds trite, and we've probably all heard that before, but like, no challenge in life comes without some sort of learning. So I think, like, let's all, dive in and take what we can out of every experience.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. Eleanor, did you have anything to add there?
Oh, very little. That's it's Kelly described that beautifully, and I think the acceptance piece is key, because part of what we tend to try and do is still put our mental and physical energy into the things that we can't do anything about, even if that's through lots and lots of worry or rumination. And what we need to do is accept what we can't change. Again, I know it does sound trite, as Kelly mentioned, but what you do when you're able to do that is that you can redistribute energy into the things that you can do something about. And even in situations where we've all found ourselves where we ended up in the situation completely at the whim of something that we couldn't have done anything about, there's always a small step that we can do something to move forward. So I think focusing on what you can do is the steadying factor. It's the hardest factor sometimes, but it kind of what helps reorient you a bit.
Fantastic. Now moving on to curiosity. It killed the cat, but it's good for us. Eleanor, what recommendations do you have for someone early in their career in relation to practicing curiosity for the benefit of strengthening their career adaptability?
Yeah, this is a good one. I think, what comes with moving from being a novice to an expert is the more you know that you don't know. And it can be a little bit frightening, I think, early on to become more experienced, but to realize that you know only a fraction of what it is that you need to know. So I think there's a couple of things here with curiosity. One is that you can make assumptions about how something is going to go, and it might not actually pan out that way. So if you can get in there with curiosity, even if it's something that might not feel welcome, that can make a huge difference. And I think it's also, it's not just about what we know, it's not just knowledge and skills, but it's connections too in our workplaces. So who are you connecting with? Who's challenging you? Who are you observing? Is there kind of a breadth to that as well, are the things that I would say.
Beautiful. And Kelly, did you have anything to add here? Any cat-related puns to get a pattern going?
I'm a dog person, sorry, Zach, but
Me too.
I would say, like, just some reflections on being curious. I think that it's about looking outside of your comfort zone, or about things that are familiar to you, or tasks that you're most comfortable doing. This is how we can expand our limits and grow as human beings. I think as well, when there comes a point where you're looking to advance your career, don't like narrow or limit your focus upwards. I think that there's always opportunities sideways to expand and learn and develop new skills. So I would say don't always look up. And here to what Eleanor was saying about networks and the people that you are connected with in your organisation. I've almost always been and continue to be involved in employee resource groups. I'm involved in 3 different ones actually at Allianz. I also like to keep myself busy. I've got a lot of energy. So these are great ways to meet people beyond your direct business unit. I think that you don't just meet them, you get to collaborate with them. You're working on something that you're equally motivated and passionate about. So I think that's a really great way to expand your network. I think as well, like, think about curiosity like outside of your career. And I think there's opportunities in your personal life that will influence your career. So full transparency, I'm 43, and when I was 42, I thought I'd start playing basketball for the first time in 20 years. I knew no one on the team. Like, I was literally going to the local basketball stadium saying, do you have a team that I can play in? I know not everyone would feel comfortable doing that. But to be fair, like I couldn't remember even how to do a layup. So I've since actually like really good friends with these group of men and women that I play with every week. It's like now my favourite activity. So I think just keep looking for opportunities.
I really like that example, Kelly. As someone who's really desperately trying to develop their 3-point shot, I sympathise as well.
I can't help you there, Zach.
Everyone seems to say the same thing after they've seen my shot. So, okay, moving finally into confidence, that last domain. Kelly, you mentioned before, you know, that imposter syndrome that you felt at times and still do feel, and kind of suggested that can't wait for it to kick in. You just have to go for it, or you'll be waiting around forever. That for some, that advice might be enough. For others, I suspect the fear of failure and accompanying anxiety might hold them back. Were those feelings ever present for you? And if so, how did you overcome them? What could some of our audience members take away?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty clear that those feelings have existed for me at some points, to answer that question directly. And as I said, don't wait for that elusive moment. You'll likely miss out on a really great opportunity that you would succeed at. I think that, as I said, dive in. At the very least, you're going to learn a lot. Confidence comes from doing. So I think that with experience comes confidence as well. I think confidence can also come from being really well prepared. So being really well prepared can often propel you over those nerves or that lack of confidence. And I think Eleanor said it before, like, you will fail. We all do. And yep, it's probably going to knock your confidence, but don't let it derail where you're heading or what your aspirations are. Again, I think there's a certain level of acceptance that failure is a part of our human experience, and like, let's acknowledge that actually failure can be a good thing. I guarantee you there's not a single successful person who's never failed. So I think that we look at the senior leaders in our organisation or even our own managers, and we assume that they always know what they're doing. But to be fair, I think that they're also always growing. They're also always learning, and will most certainly have failed at some point, if not often. So yeah, don't be afraid to fail.
Yep, great point. And they just keep telling me to keep shooting from 3, because eventually we catch a hot streak.
Yeah, just keep one day, Zach. It'll happen.
The basketball analogy continues strong. Eleanor, is there anything that you would add to that?
Just, I guess, from a psychological perspective, is having some tools that help you manage self-doubt and help you manage, some of the thought patterns that we can get caught in when we're worried about that we're not good enough. There's a lot of things you can do. It's really important that if that's you, we've got to be careful about overworking in response to imposter. And I guess the three things I would say very briefly are making sure you take things a step at a time. You can't jump 5 steps ahead, but when you're working to your ability and capacity, you'll just keep going a step ahead. Being kind to yourself comes back to tools about how to manage, and then also being realistic. It's okay to be human, and move through this step by step.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for your contributions there. Now, we're not quite finished, but I am mindful that we've hit 11:45 and I understand some people may need to jet off. We'd love you to stick around in case this is the point where you need to, this is the station you have to get off at. Just wanted to share here. First, a thank you for attending. Second, we would love to receive any feedback you have in relation to this session. You can provide that by scanning the QR code on the screen. And if you're interested in learning more, you can check out the website. Just Google CMHAA. It's going to be probably far easier. So we'll leave that up for just a moment for anyone that wants to quickly be able to add their thoughts, scan the QR code and respond later if they need to. That's totally fine. In the meantime, I don't see much in the Q&A in the chat. Luckily, here are some questions we've prepared earlier, but a reminder that if you do have any, now is a great time to drop them in. And in fact, we may had one just then. Maybe not. Not yet. Okay, great. Well, here's one we can begin with. How can you best work with your immediate manager to develop your career adaptability? Eleanor, perhaps did you want to start on that one?
Yeah, so I'll probably hand to Kelly fairly quickly on this one, but I guess what I would say from the background is regular communication that's focused on development. So it's very hard for that to stay on the agenda when you're really busy and everybody's really busy. So that's just one thing I would say is how can you have the regular conversations? That'd be my main standout. I don't know, Kelly, if you want to add.
Oh, it's along those lines, Eleanor, of just like seeking feedback. So making sure that you do have those regular check-in points with your manager where you have opportunities to get feedback on either what is or is not working for you. I think that, like that regular communication that you're talking about, Eleanor, is really important.
Yep, fantastic. And there is one that we can pull out of the chat here. It's just in relation to whether we should be linking that concern domain with the areas that are in our control. The idea being that being concerned with areas outside of control is potentially a waste of energy. Eleanor, from a theoretical perspective, does that match the framework?
Yeah, and I love the comment actually, because what someone's done there is recognise that all 4 of these domains actually link to one another at some point in some way. So yes is the answer. I think that's a great interpretation and definitely with it.
Right, and thank you, Richard, for that question. And if anyone has any more, please, now is your opportunity. One more for our panelists from me. I know we have some people in our audience who are already people managers, so this one is perhaps more for them. What would it look like to support others in the development of their career adaptability? And Kelly, perhaps you're best placed to respond to that one.
Yeah, happy to talk to that. I think without being a little repetitive, it is having those conversations where you can provide feedback. I think that putting things like growth mindset tools into the hands of people who need it. I think that helping the people that report into you to identify their strengths so that they're not constantly focused on the areas that may require growth or development. I think that you're never going to be a perfect human and you're never going to have 100% like capacity in all of those domains. I think that quite often we think, oh, we need to grow and develop in this space, but perhaps it's actually just uplifting the skills that you already have and focusing on those as your core skills. We can't be good at everything, I'm afraid. Not even 3-point shot, Zach. Not always.
Oh, well. Okay, we've got a couple more in the chat, and I think we might have to just go through those two, and then we'll have to wrap for today. The first one was, do you feel like planners struggle more with adaptability than others in the workplace? And then as a follow-up, how can workplaces help those who like clarity in their job descriptions while understanding that the workplace is a volatile place? Kelly, did you want to give that one another crack?
I feel like I probably need to hand to Eleanor, given
Okay.
she's more of a planner than I am. So if Eleanor wants to have a go at the first one, maybe I can jump in on the second.
It's an interesting question. I think that the core of the model here, when we're thinking about planning, is just recognizing that everything that you're doing at the moment informs what you do in the future. So I know that sounds really simple, but that's what I keep coming back to. So some people will do that intuitively, and others need to remind themselves about, how will I prepare and how will I get there? So yes, Kelly's example is in a way, I can be more flexible if I don't have a clear plan, and that is absolutely the flip side here. But some of this is just more about anticipating possible outcomes, and giving yourself an opportunity to have a think about how you want to get to the next place once in a while.
I wouldn't say that being an unplanner is necessarily the way to go, to be fair, because I think that sometimes things you're not prepared for things. I think that by planning and having a variety of options at your disposal, like as opposed to flying by the seat of your pants, I think can definitely benefit you.
Fantastic. And now just going to that last question we've got through the Q&A. This one relates to considering the importance of being able to be flexible, adaptable, and work with different people. What strategies could perhaps be proposed for bouncing back from a particularly bruising experience? It certainly sounds like this one's going to centre around resilience, particularly when working with perhaps others that don't gel with you or are critical. Eleanor, how would that fit into our framework? And then I might throw to you, Kelly, if there's any practical tips you may have as well.
Look, I would probably start on this one with what I can control. We can't control what other people say and do. We can't control their behaviour. We do have some influence, though, at times with not just our reflections on what might have gone differently in that situation, and some of the hard questions about would any skills on our behalf would have helped. And then part of it is then acceptance, coming back to Kelly's point, what is it that I need to process about that? These really difficult things do happen, and some of this, that they can impact how you feel for a while about work and about yourself. So what is it about that experience that really was really getting to you? What's within your kind of scope, and what do you kind of need to let go? I would just add there quickly, linking in though with trusted mentors and leaders after experiences like that can be really helpful, because they will have been through something similar themselves.
I definitely agree, especially if we're talking about a particular situation that might require a bit of a debrief. Even if it's a colleague that you trust, I think that finding, even if it's a family member, unloading on a family member. I think one of the things as well that you learn over time is that you're not going to have the same views or perceptions on things as everyone. So acknowledging that two different situations can coexist. So one person's experience can coexist with your experience, and they don't have to be the same, if that makes sense. So you're not, I think, yeah, just sort of understanding that there's going to be people who don't have the same view on things as you, and that's okay. And that's just their view and perspective on things.
Yep. I think those are great additions and scenarios that we're all likely to face as well. And when things get a bit hairy like that, that's probably when some of these learnings are most critical too. So thank you both for those contributions. That will take us to the end of today's session. I'm mindful we've gone slightly over, so thank you to those that have stuck through. The biggest thank you to Eleanor and Kelly, both of you, for your time and contribution to today's event. It's fantastic to have your skills and experience lent to the CMHAA event. Thank you also to everyone for attending today. The CMHAA and the Early in Careers Committee members are successful when we're able to share these resources with you. So your attendance means a great deal, and we hope the learnings will be of use. If you have any feedback, please do feel free to use the QR code. That will take you to a feedback form, and it's also there's also a link to it that's been dropped in the Teams chat. Keep an eye out also for videos and content related to this webinar, which will be shared in the coming weeks. And of course, feel free to share that content with others in your network. Finally, to find out more and to get involved with the CMHAA, Thriving from the Start Network, or the EIC, please visit our website. It's on the screen now. It's in the chat. You can just Google CMHAA or Bing, whatever's your choice. Once more, thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
And thanks, Zach, for facilitating.